Hello and welcome to the Tech Runway's Entrepreneur Exchange program, where we always have a phenomenal speaker, give lots of advice and opportunities. So I'm Dr. Kevin Cox. I'm the Assistant Director over at the Adams Center for Entrepreneurship, but I like to moonlight out at the Tech Runway because it's so much fun. And I will be co-hosting this evening, but one of the things we'll probably talk about is a little bit of marketing and advertising. So with that in mind, I just share that we are taking registrations for our boot camp and our Veterans Entrepreneurship program over at the Adams Center. So I threw a couple links in there into the chat if you're interested in any of those programs. Those are more comprehensive, in-depth educational trainings, and you're stuck with me instead of a phenomenal speaker. But some people have gone through and been successful. So take a look if you're interested. Now, I won't take up any more time. Let me introduce Rachelle Franklin. She is a seasoned global marketing executive with a proven track record of leading and executing global brand strategy, advertising, and integrated marketing programs for major Fortune 500 companies that build equity and drive profitable sales, among many other things that she can talk to us about this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Rachelle to maybe provide a more elongated introduction and talk a little bit about your background, and I'll throw in questions throughout the ride tonight.
Okay, well, hello everybody. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for spending what is, I'm sure, very valuable time to hopefully get some nuggets and some insights tonight. My name is Rachelle Franklin. If you haven't heard me speak before or we don't know each other, I am a 33-year Boca Raton resident. I came here to work for Motorola straight out of graduate school in 1988. Joined as a product planner, did 14 years there, ended my career as a VP of marketing for Motorola worldwide across all our lines of businesses. Then I left Motorola to dodge the Chicago cold. And right now, at this point in time, I'm so glad I live in Florida. And I ended up joining Office Depot as a VP of integrated brand marketing, helping them to turn around their business after 4 years of negative comp sales through integrated marketing promotions and promotions across their retail, direct, and online businesses. Then I got pulled back into technology, went to work for Cable and Wireless, which is a London-based company that actually was the incumbent telecom monopoly in the Caribbean across 15 English-speaking islands. And I went there with a number of senior executives to prepare that business for deregulation. So I helped the company to rebrand, repackage, reprice, remarket their services so they could compete successfully. And they are still around under a different name, but they did survive, which is great. And then I worked for a deregulated energy company for a hot minute, Liberty Power in South Florida, before going out on my own. I decided after about 20 years of corporate that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, though I had toyed with that idea for many years. At that point in time, I felt like I had enough tools in my toolbox to step out. And I started my own consultancy. I actually ended up joining a business partner in New York. We ran a lifestyle marketing agency for about 14 years together, servicing global brands such as Microsoft, Best Buy, Sony. I did work locally with ADT, AutoNation, Palm Beach State College, FPL. And most recently, I decided to go back to my roots and do tech startup advising. That's how I got introduced to Tech Runway. And I really felt like, my passion was tech. It's where I started my career. I became a mentor at Tech Runway. And then I joined the mentor advisory board. I think I've been a mentor now 4 years. This past year, due to COVID, I stepped out as a mentor and started doing advising through the SBDC at FAU under the CARES Act. So helping small businesses who were really struggling during COVID to get some valuable consultative support so they could navigate these crazy waters that we're in. At the same time, a company that I was advising that's in the digital tech and media space, I was advising them for 4 years. I joined them as a COO, and they are based in Africa. And so we just launched a show called Take Back the Mic. It just finished airing and in 8 countries in Africa. And we're fundraising, we're building a business, and we're growing the company. So that's where I am. So I'm committed to FAU Tech Runway. So whenever they ask me to speak, I'm here because I think there's some valuable insights that I can impart. It won't be me just talking to you. I encourage you guys to ask whatever you want. To the extent that I can answer questions, I will, based on my experience. If not, you know, Dr. Cox is an amazing person. And between the two of us, I'm sure we can answer whatever questions you have today. But this is really for you. So, you know, you get out of it what you put into it. So we're going to kind of let it flow. I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Cox. We're open to any questions you have, and we'll ponder them and try to address them.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. I mean, your experience is really expansive in terms of industry, geography, parts of the business even. It's not just advertising and marketing, but product development. You mentioned pricing. You mentioned all the components of marketing, but also some operational attributes. But I'd like to stay in the marketing and advertising domain for now, because admittedly, I kind of have to teach all the components of business, right? And it is the one that I would say I find it the hardest. I don't know. I was going to say it's the part I do the worst, but I find it difficult because it changes all the time. So having so much experience in the industry, what are some major trends that you've seen over the long term, not just kind of changes in algorithms that change how you might boost post and things that I struggle to keep up with that are annoying? But stepping back, somebody with your experience who's seen, you know, major changes and can view things kind of like the forest through the trees, what are some trends you've noticed over the years and some things that might be particularly relevant for startups and then tech startups in particular?
You know, the biggest trend, as we know, is everything is digital. I mean, and that has changed the landscape tremendously. So the marketing mix is much more diverse, much more fragmented, and I don't think that's going to change. So what I see happening is, like, businesses are struggling to keep up, right? It's just so much information and it's changing so fast that they're chasing. You know, so everybody moved away from traditional and went to digital and thought that digital could do everything for their business. They wanted to build a brand and they wanted to, you know, turn leads into sales and then turn that into loyalty. The reality is digital is just one part of the mix in marketing, but everybody ran that way and expected it to be able to be the end all be all silver bullet. There is no silver bullet in marketing, and you cannot create a viral moments. Viral moments are just that. They're viral moments. They become viral because the consumer decides that it's compelling enough. So I think that's the biggest trend that I see, and I see businesses kind of running to the tactics of marketing instead of really sitting back and simplifying what it's about. Because marketing is all about knowing your customer, knowing what their needs and wants are, and delivering a product or a service that they are willing to spend their dollars on. And I think if you keep it simplified to focusing on the customer instead of saying, I think I got to do this or I think I got to do that, and you do enough research and understanding of who are these people, what drives their decisions, what are some insights into how they purchase and their journey, and then walk through that journey and make sure you're touching them at all the relevant points. Even at a simplistic level is the most strategic way to approach marketing. So, you know, the trends that you hear now is omni-channel marketing. That basically means you're meeting them at different points in the journey. If it's researching online, then shopping in store online, and then going to a repeat visit. That's the kind of omni-channel. Are you reaching the customer where they are? Another thing that is a big buzz in marketing is customer journey mapping. And everybody thinks that that's very complicated because it sounds complicated, but it's really not that hard. And it's a valuable exercise that can be done just, you know, freestyle or in Excel. You know, what do I do? You know, how does a customer in my industry research when they're interested? Or how do I get them interested? And where are they looking for that information? Do they look for it online, which most people do today? Are they talking to friends or colleagues or other like businesses? Then when they get past that, what's the next step that they take? What's the next step that they take? That is all customer journey mapping is about. But the value of that exercise is if you map how the customer goes through their decision journey against how you run your business and where you meet them, it often provides really good nuggets as to where you're missing the boat. You know, I'll give you an example. I did a project with ADT, and it's a really relevant example. And they said, oh, Rachelle, have you ever done customer retention marketing? And I'm like, yeah, I worked in retail. You know, that's what it's about every day. You live the numbers day after day and how you're going to get the customer to come back, buy again and again and again and increase their basket. So, but the struggle that they were having is, you know, they had all this information about their customer, but in very disparate places. You know, customer service may have some, install may have some, the research department may have some, and they had mapped the customer journey, but they really had mapped, like, where are we losing customers? At what point in that journey are we just losing customers? And so through the process, what we found out, which, I mean, this seems like so obvious, but it took an exercise to do it. They were doing a good job of selling people in, doing a good job of installing. But at the point between install and that first payment, they were losing a bunch of customers. So they thought it was a marketing problem. But in reality, after looking at the journey and the operations, guess what, guys? It was an operational problem. So marketing could have gone out and done more things to generate more potential customers and get them into the pipeline. But if you're investing in that sale and it takes you 2 years to break even on that customer, and you lost them before they ever made the first payment, that's a lot of business revenue to lose. And that is a fairly easy operational fix. But so mapping is not just for mapping's sake. Mapping can be really valuable to helping you understand where you're meeting a customer in the right way and where you may be losing them. And it could save your business a lot of money.
So there's a couple really important points there where I see a lot of the same stuff you mentioned, and you mentioned fundamentally knowing your customer's process for acquiring your product or service and how important that is, and having a really deep understanding of it and an accurate understanding, as opposed to relying on assumptions or what you think they do. You really need to observe that type of behavior if you can, set up a scenario where you have kind of the data and the metrics on the back end. And I think that's really great. Not to mention, if you can figure that out, you can just adapt to fit with your customer's behavior and integrate into that process, as opposed to trying to change the customer's behavior. Because we work with such innovative companies here at the Tech Runway and throughout South Florida, oftentimes they may have something so innovative, they need to change the customer's behavior. Well, that can be really, really, really expensive. You know, humans kind of do what humans do. And it's much easier to say, okay, they're going here. Why don't I meet them there? And then offer.
Right wave than to try and create a new wave, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other point you mentioned, which I think is particularly relevant right now, there's been a lot of talk about it. Matter of fact, I'll probably throw something in the chat here. There were a couple episodes of a podcast called Freakonomics, but what they were really based on were a couple of large-scale studies that I found really intriguing because I'm a professor and a real big nerd. So they were these economists who took a look at, you know, how well does advertising work? And they looked at television, and then they looked at digital, and they found several examples of cases in which once they got out all their calculators and did their econometrics, that it really wasn't working, right? But it's not that advertising doesn't work. We know that's not the case, but there are instances when you can do it wrong, and it can be really, really expensive. So tracking those metrics is just, it's so important, and understanding how you can capture some return on investment. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but I think in these examples, and one of the researchers, the guys from University of Chicago, worked with eBay, and eBay was doing branded paid search term. So like the term eBay, they were paying AdWords and paying out on that. And they determined with the data that that expenditure, if they stopped it completely, they'd lose about 0.5% of their revenue. But then remember, their revenue is only a small percentage of like their sales, their actual profit or revenue. So once they had the data, they literally they reduced spending on branded digital by $100 million. Mm-hmm. And it didn't influence their business at all. So I guess getting to a question, right? Do you have any tips or suggestions when you've got a company like eBay who's got just in one sector of their digital, they're spending $100 million and is doing nothing? That can be a little bit horrifying for startup entrepreneurs who may have a budget of a few hundred or a few thousand. If a big company like eBay, and not to mention many others, if they're not spending it in a ROI type of way, how can, you know, fledgling entrepreneurs and startups make sure that they're spending some of their funds as efficiently as possible? Do you have any suggestions and tips and what they might do to avoid that?
Okay, so search advertising is extremely expensive, you know, and it probably was very important for eBay at the early stages of their business when they were building awareness versus the later stages of their business where it's like everybody knows who eBay is. You don't need to be paying for those search terms. So I think what sometimes happens in businesses, they don't evolve their spending and their marketing mix with their evolving business. So for example, when I joined Office Depot, I had about $180 million budget, and it was being spent on media sponsorships and a whole lot of stuff, right? Not in all the right places that are aligned to where the business is. So the first answer is big businesses don't necessarily know all the right answers. So don't look to them necessarily as the guide. Again, know your customers better than anything and what your unique value proposition is, and that would be much more valuable than following trends. But the point I was making with Office Depot is that, you know, they were spending I'm talking a ton of money on sports sponsorships. Now, at the time when Office Depot wasn't really well known and they were really competing head to head with Staples and Office Max, it was kind of like pervasive advertising and awareness building and driving traffic into the stores. That was the goal. Their core audience was small businesses, small business owners, you know, watch a lot of sports, attend a lot of sporting events. That made sense. But at some point, you're competing head to head. It's not an awareness problem. You don't need pervasive sports sponsorships to have your name plastered everywhere. You need select things that are really going to drive store traffic that you want. So the point is, there are no right answers, and there is not a silver bullet in marketing. So in terms of how to decide where to spend, every company, I guarantee you, from major multi-billion-dollar companies to a small startup, are trying to figure out what the ROI is on their marketing. In reality, very few marketing vehicles have a direct relationship to, I do something and I get the customer to take an action, and therefore I have a direct return on investment. The only place where you can do that, if you do a coupon, right? And I redeem a coupon and I can actually say, for that ad, that coupon, I know it was redeemed. Sometimes digital advertising, because the person can take an action right then and there. But just think about your own personal journey. You may do research. You may go in a store and look and touch something. You might want to buy online, but you may want to feel this product to buy it. You may have talked to a friend. So all of these touch points are affecting how you make your decision. So I think the key is, again, know how your customer shops, makes a decision about your category, and not just based on research that is secondary, right? That you could find, like, oh, in the restaurant industry, these things are happening. Know how it relates to you. And it is somewhat trial and error, but knowing that you've got to touch a person in a lot of different ways in order to make those impressions that ultimately drive their action. Now, sometimes you could do promotional stuff where you see lifts, but for the long haul, it's like investing in a stock market, okay? If you're a risk taker, you're gonna do 90% equities and you're gonna go for the ride. It may be a great ride, and then it might be a very bad ride. I think it's the same thing in marketing. There is not one vehicle that's gonna give you all the return. So you wanna be diversified in how you invest in your marketing so that you're kind of shooting on all cylinders. But of course, being where your customer is and knowing at what point in that process, what are they doing? Are they just researching? Or are they making a decision, and making sure that you're meeting them at that point with the right message and the right incentive to take action? It's really kind of, I call it fairly simple because it seems simple to me, I think businesses make it feel more complicated because they're trying to model it instead of really just saying, wait, do I really know my customer? Do I know what my competition is doing? And how am I lining up relative to them? Right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I am a big proponent of kind of tracking everything and experimenting, both things you sort of mentioned. Like, always encourage entrepreneurs to make sure they understand, what their return on investment is, and track as much as they possibly can. When possible, it's funny you mentioned the getting deeply invested in sports. I always kind of wondered, how they'd calculate, an ROI on naming a stadium, right? I've been to a Saints game. I didn't leave and think, man, I could really use a Mercedes-Benz now that game's over, but they must see some value there.
I did the naming rights for the Office Depot Center, which is now the BB&T. It's a very expensive proposition. I've done NASCAR. That's one, and CART. Those are some of the most expensive propositions. And I will promise you, when you put it to paper, there is no way that you're going to directly calculate an ROI on those investments. But it is about building brand awareness, building brand equity, activating, touching the customer in a relevant way in those areas where you reach them. A lot of sports is you're talking to a customer when they're not in the buying process. So they may be open to hearing more about who you are, and that kind of sticks in the back of their mind. Like, I will frequent brands that support things that I believe in, right? So you can't really measure that, but it's real.
Yeah, and the other thing I just wanted to highlight and add on to is, you mentioned that trial and error. While I am a big proponent of tracking and ROI, like you should be very, very comfortable with some experimentation, particularly when you don't know what might or might not work. And you shouldn't view that as a loss. You should view that as a cost of educating, right? Like, okay, that didn't work, but I learned it didn't work. And when you learn something that does work, it will be invaluable. It should pay for the things that didn't work time and time again. So you shouldn't feel bad early on, kind of doing a lot of that experimentation. Know your customer, experiment intelligently, come up with good hypotheses, and then test them. But at the same time, you should be comfortable. Nowadays, you can do so many tests with such small amounts of funds, especially on the internet, where you can say, okay, that didn't work, that did work, these influencers work, these posts don't work, whatever it may be. So I'd encourage everybody.
No, you are so right. So if you're buying digital media, guys, you can do A/B testing. You know, you can say, I'm going to test an ad against this audience that has this kind of offer and this kind of message. And you could do another ad against the same audience with maybe the same offer and a different message, or a different message and a different offer. And you will see a difference. And if there is a significant enough difference, that's going to give you the learnings that you need so that maybe you make a bigger investment in what you know is going to yield the kind of actions that you want to take. And, you know, for example, with influencer marketing, you know, everybody expects that influencers, because they have an audience, that they can all of a sudden convert that audience to buy, you know, your product. Sometimes that works. What people are finding is it doesn't work a lot of the time. And so the thing about marketing is you can't be wedded to anything. You have to flex with the market as it's moving and with fickle customer behavior. Because let's just face it, the audience of today is not as brand loyal as like people my age. Okay, these young consumers are willing to try new things. They don't care if it's a brand they never heard of. If they think the value proposition is aligned with something they want, they will buy it, they will try it, and if they like it, they'll buy again, and if not, they'll move on. That's a very different customer behavior than your traditional kind of marketing teachings, you know, which is certain customer segments are brand loyal, and you want to build loyalty and then repeat purchases. There is something about what digital commerce has done, and even like with COVID, the ability to kind of ship and return without, you know, any real consequence. This audience is trying more things than they ever have before, which opens the door to lots of new competitors. It's great for startups, to me, because if a startup hits it right, they can have a winner, right? It's tough when you're in the business competing day after day with this ever-changing consumer, you know, behavior.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that. I was just processing a return on Amazon, and one of the click down, drop down reasons was, in fact, found a better product. Like, so as I, you know, searching, and I bought one, but then maybe I was searching later at night and was like, oh, this one looks better. That's a rationale that people on a whim will just say, you know, because shipping's easy. Sometimes they'll even pick it up for you. It's a piece of cake. You're absolutely right. So we've got a real specific question from Bobby. So I'll go through that with you, and then I'll try to broaden it maybe a little more for the group. He's got a technology product for viewers at stadiums, and his customer would ideally be the 2021 Olympics in Japan, but he's been trying to get in touch with the Olympic Committee, the IOC, the USA Olympic Committee. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that? Is the specific?
I've been an Olympic. Okay, so I've been an Olympic sponsor when I was at Motorola, and we provided all of the communications equipment for a number of years in the Olympics. So the Olympics is a big bear. And what I will say is sometimes the sponsors are the ones that are bringing solutions to the table, you know. This is when you got to really kind of work your network and work your network's network and work your network's network. You know, Who do you know in your network that may be doing sports marketing, right? Who do you know in your network that maybe has a connection to a brand that is a major Olympic sponsor? That's a way to get in. To get into these very big and structured sports organizations is really, really tough, even with great solutions. Okay. But some of the solutions the Olympic Committee doesn't provide, that's what they use sponsors for. Okay. They use sponsors to offset a lot of what is needed to activate those events. So I would say if you're not having success reaching out to the IOC or the USA Olympic Committee and you can't find a contact that has a contact inside, then I would go through, if you have better contacts through brands and you could get through a brand and maybe bring something to their attention, a sports marketer per se, who has to activate, by the way, maybe that's a way in. It's a tough one to do other than cold calling and being extremely tenacious.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the broader kind of question there, which I think you really already mostly answered as well, is just for anyone, how would you get to a top decision maker at a large organization or in charge of a large event? And I think you hit on a lot of strategies there. And I'll just reiterate, it really is about a person. Right? You've got to find a person who knows a person. You can't sell to a university. You can't sell to the Olympics. You can't sell to these massive enterprises or these institutions, because at the end of the day, there's a human being that's going to have to say yes, and maybe you have to write a check. Ideally, you'd want to find out who that is and figure out how to get to them. That can be really difficult to do. Sometimes you can get to somebody maybe right under them, and then maybe you can have such a great demo or experience that, they will take it up the flagpole because they know within that organization, if that tech is really that great, they'll probably get a bump in their career by saying, look what I found. This guy found me on LinkedIn. I did the demo. We should check this out. And you can get a proponent on the inside of an organization. That's kind of the best way, or one really efficient way, if you can do it. But again, it's hard.
No, I agree. And I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I can't remember everybody that I've met across, my career, but LinkedIn really helps me to make connections, not just for myself, but for other people. And so I think LinkedIn's a great place to go. And sometimes people will respond to something. What I also would say is, there are often, remember, this is big stuff. So there are often RFPs that are put out around, big events like this. And I would think that there is some initiative around how do I make it more interactive? People are at home. I'm not going to have people in, at the Olympics the way that traditionally you do. I would look to see where those RFPs are. Like, where do they reside? And anything that smells like something that you could pitch, I would pitch it, just to get it in front of them in a process that's already established. Because remember, these are big, huge organizations that have very traditional ways that they do things. They come to change very slowly because change means money. And there's not a lot of new money. So it's like they would have to take old money and repurpose it. Generally, that doesn't happen. So I would look to see where RFPs may lie and see if there's any way for you to pitch in some way.
Yeah, and I just add on to that, if you're trying to get to a premier or super premium kind of event or organization, which I would say the Olympics is, it's a worldwide, massively popular event, always good to sort of try to establish some credibility any way possible. But this goes for anybody who maybe your customer is a school like FAU. Maybe you start with a smaller school. Maybe you start with a local soccer team and in their stadium, and you say, you know what, I can give this to you at cost, but I want all the data. I want all the edited video. I want everything. I want you to call me a partner in some of your content, so you can establish like, hey, I've done this here, I've done this there,
Absolutely.
now I'm ready to go up here.
And what I will say is, Kevin, that's a great point. And, all of the MLB, NBA, NFL teams, those decisions are made at the team level. Okay. So you have, multitudes of sports organizations and teams who have their own marketing departments, their own media, arms, where they could decide to do something like that. So I concur, maybe you start small instead of, going for the big fish, unless you've already done that. Maybe they have, I don't know.
Sure, definitely. So now we've got another question about marketing educational mobile apps. There's so many apps, so many great apps, cost little or nothing, very competitive kind of marketplace within the App Store. Any suggestions in that area?
Well, the App Store ain't going to promote it, so forget about that. So, it's like writing a book. A publisher is not going to promote your book. You're going to have to do it yourself. You're going to have to get on the speaker circuit. So here's the deal. The best way to do it, and since it is an app, the best place to be is in digital, because that's where a person can easily download. And it's probably the least expensive way to do it. So here again, who is your customer? Who is the app targeted to? Where are they? Are there forums and places where they are and you can reach them? Maybe it's even doing content, providing content, written content. Everybody's looking for great content around, what mobile education can do, what apps are out there, and then you do your thing talking about yours. That's one way to do it. So be where the people are who you think would be interested. Then you could also do digital advertising. Once again, if you know your customers, you know their consideration sets, like they may be buying, or people who may download your app are also downloading other educational type apps. What other educational type apps would they be downloading? And you can do very small buys against that. So those are two digital ways to do it. The other way to do it, but it's tough today, is to be in front of industry leaders and industry influencers who can advocate for you. So you can use an influencer strategy if there are people who are in the education sector who really think what you got to offer is very compelling. Get those people to be spokespersons for you, because they may have a better chance of reaching an audience that you can't reach. So I think there are a number of ways to do it. All of it takes time and money, but not necessarily money if you get some advocates. Look at people who are bloggers on educational apps and see if they would carry your story.
Great suggestions. We've got a question coming from CloudSight, which is a tech runway company. They do collaboration and execution software for supply chain teams, and they can replace emails with smart centralized hub. They'd like to know your thoughts on comparison marketing. For example, they see ads, NetSuite's ads, frequently asked, is QuickBook holding you back? But you see this in a lot of different places where there's a lot of switching, probably most often. What do you think about this comparison strategy?
I was in the telecom space, because so churn is the name of the game, right? It's like, what do you do to get a customer to churn off of somebody else's service to your service? Sometimes it's price, sometimes it's service. I think the question you have to ask yourself is, do you have a really unique value proposition against a major supplier that is your competitor? And if you really do believe that you have a truly competitive advantage, why not? There's only 3 ways you can grow a business. It's getting new customers, right? Stealing customers from your competitor, And what's the other one? New people, new customers that are new to the market, new customers that are already in the market, and customers that are your competitors' customers. So the question is, if you have a little bit of a track record, ask your customers, why did they choose you? And at what point in their journey did they start to consider and choose you? Now, your NetSuites and your QuickBooks are big brands. So you're going up against some big guys. But sometimes big brands are not good for everybody because they may service, let's say they service a high-end, mid-sized client really well, but for a real micro business, they're not so good, right? Or QuickBooks has much too many features that a small business doesn't need. What is it that is your compelling value prop? And is it just price, or is it some of your service offerings, or is it simplicity? What is it? And make sure that you validate that with your customers. Make sure you know what helped them to make that decision. So if you're a young company, awareness is a big problem. So the biggest way to set who am I is to set it against your competitive set, right? And maybe they'll consider you because all of a sudden they now put you in the competitive set with your like competitors, and you have very clearly articulated what is it that is your unique value prop. I mean, that's the issue that a lot of companies who are going up against Salesforce, are challenged with. Salesforce is a behemoth. But there are some other solutions out there that are really better suited for certain kinds of businesses. But when you're fighting a Salesforce, it gets very tough. But it's easy if you go head to head, if you know who your customers are and you know what your unique value prop is. So I'm a fan of comparison when you know those two things, comparative advertising.
Yeah, and if you genuinely are really good, there are some kind of more online guerrilla techniques that I've had a couple companies be successful with. For example, more so in consumer products, but maybe also in supply chain management software. If you Google the best, insert anything here. I don't care, running shoes, tennis racket, golf clubs, supply chain software, sales software. You're going to see a few lists that organically come to the top of Google. And those lists, believe it or not, get a lot of hits because a lot of people search best, and whatever it could be, the best healthy breakfast. And there will be a list and somebody who inevitably is winning on organic search. And they may be associated with one of the companies, but they may not be. And you can kind of look at these lists and see, like, are you on there? And if you aren't, but you truly believe you're better, find out who the publisher and the author are and say, hey, look, I'll send you my product. I'll give you a trial of my software. I should be on this list. I have a question for your product. Where do I send them? When can we meet? You've missed something here. And they want to have arguably the best list because it'll get the best traffic. And you'll see a lot of them on the top page of Google. And it's kind of a roundabout way to get yourself into an organic search, right? So now you don't have to have them
without having to pay for it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. So the key is everybody needs to think, I may have a particular customer, but who are my key constituencies that I need to mind? So who may influence my customer base? So in this case, it's, analysts or, bloggers or experts in certain industries who customers look to for guidance and directions. In some cases, when you're fundraising, right? It's like, a key constituency of mine is investors, and investors who invest at the A round or the seed round or whatever. So when you think about your business and your customers, don't just think about the person who is the last 3 feet of the sale, but all of those other key constituencies who are critical to helping you successfully reach and help to and convert, who are your target customers.
Yeah, I sometimes find, particularly if it's a complex customer with multiple people and identities and positions involved, it can be really helpful just to diagram all this stuff out. So you have a really good depiction of what everyone's roles are, who you need to talk to, who you need to convince, who has the budget, who makes the decision, who is in charge of the renewals, all of these kind of things. They may be different people, they may be different actors, they may have a horse in the race, but you need to understand all of those considerations, because otherwise you'll find it most likely difficult to satisfy all the people that are involved in that decision-making process. And when we're talking about enterprise software in particular, it can be a major change if they're going to kind of adopt an entirely new system. Not to mention, it can be really, really lucrative for you as the enterprise software company owner. You know, these sales cycles can be long, and I know that's really painful because we've got cash flow and revenue, and but you know, you get a big customer. You know, again, I use the university as an example because I'm trapped here, and it's huge bureaucracy. And if you can get a school like FAU for whatever, chances that they're going to change, you're really going to have to mess it up, because if it's a university level kind of adoption of something, same goes for large companies though. Don't be stuck in education. If they make that decision, if you win that sale because you know who all those players are and you can satisfy all of them and deliver what they need, that can be lucrative in perpetuity. You know, as long as you don't irritate them, there's oftentimes not a reason to change. At the same time, that's what you're fighting against, right? Like you are
Absolutely. It's
trying
hard
to
to get
make
in.
them. Yeah.
Hard to get in. But, you know, I would say, you know, specifically to Dick, you know, you have a very specific solution, a very specific customer, you know, supply chain. And so, you know, the question is, what is it that is your unique value prop, and how do those people make their decisions? And at what cycles do they make those decisions? So I think it goes back, even with a B2B sale, an enterprise sale, you know, you still, which have long, long cycle times, you still have to know what are the insights to the challenges that supply chain professionals see. I mean, I'm sure that's all part of why you built the solution that you built, you know. But if you go back to just that simple thing, am I talking to supply chain people at a company of this size? And this is what I know about their experience and how they make, you know, software type decisions. And here is my unique value prop. And you just keep that front and center so that you're not confused on who you're trying to reach and convert. Is extremely helpful. And it doesn't have to be an arduous process. And most of it you've done as part of your product development. And if you haven't, because I come from, you know, Motorola, and we used to develop a whole lot of great stuff that nobody really wanted. And think about it, the iPad was designed, it wasn't designed for a particular market. It's just like, hey, we think this is cool. And it found a market. But generally, that's not how it works. You know, but you started your product development with something in mind. Validate that the product that you have developed is actually meeting a need and solving a pain point for a customer. And if you can do that, then that becomes everything that is, you know, is the foundation for your marketing, your operations, you know, and your customer engagement.
Yeah, you're so right about kind of, if you're doing entrepreneurship the right way, then you've done a lot of this customer development stuff that we're talking about. And I mean, it's been a central theme tonight, of course, is that customer and knowing that customer. And I really can't re-emphasize that stuff enough. It's absolutely true. So other questions, go ahead and ask them now. Otherwise, we're going to jump into a break shortly, but I'll keep rambling a bit. Those customers, you know, you can't do enough customer development, and hopefully you've done it along the way. It's funny, Rachelle, that I oftentimes am in that same scenario where they do the old entrepreneurship backwards, and they come from a laboratory maybe or somewhere else on campus, and they say, oh, look what I built. And, you know, it's like, okay, it is cool. Who's it for? We don't know. And it's like,
And it's okay. Look, some of the best inventions are done that way, and it is okay. I mean, I grew up in a company that did that, and part of the reason why, and Motorola was a market maker, and part of the reason why they brought me in is like, we need a marketing person, to try and drive engineering. But it is a pull and a tug. So even if you back into it, even if you got a product that you think is a cool product, it's okay. Now you got to go back into, where is the market right now? What product could this meet? What customer could this product meet the needs of? But the real key in product development, even if you're going at it backwards, is you can't be so wedded to what you developed. So, one thing in technology is we like to give everybody all the bells and whistles. Okay. Do you know what these phones can do? Right? Do you know what capacity of these phones we use? Probably very little. Okay. So you don't have to overdevelop for the market. And most technologists and engineers, they just like to make a lot of cool stuff, and it ends up adding product cost. And part of the process of backing into, like, okay, yeah, I developed this cool thing, but what does the market really need? Who is it really for? Can I extract some of those costs out of it? And are there some things I would do differently to really make it a better market fit? So I'm not one to say don't ideate and develop, but I am one to say don't build a business on something that you haven't validated. And I'll give you an example because it's really a great example. At Motorola, we were building, I was in the paging business in the early days, and I was a product marketer. And one of the products that we were launching was the wristwatch pager. Okay? It's a pager that sat on your wrist. Now, knowing where we are with Apple Watch, that would seem like a sure bet, right? That's a given. We had a credit card pager the size of a credit card. We had a pen pager that sat like a pen, and we had a wristwatch pager. And though it was a technological marvel, because it took all this technology and it embedded it in, a device that could sit on your wrist, the market wasn't ready for that. But, the engineers had done it. We were building manufacturing plants all over the world to build it. And I said, well, I want to do some customer research. And I went all around the country and I did research across a number of people, something they had never done. And what I found out was, hey, this is cool, but because the materials weren't, they were plastic, much like we accept now with Apple, but that was unacceptable back then. And remember, you didn't have all the materials to have plastic colors. It was like black plastic. And, it was a digital watch, and people at that time was still more analog, and they wanted the analog watch. And it just was some things in the product that at the time the technology couldn't overcome. So I went back to the senior executive team and I'm like, guys, great product, but we shouldn't be building these facilities. It's going to be a niche product at best. At best. Well, we were already down the road. Well, these are billions of dollars that we're investing in manufacturing plants and tools to build this product. The market never came. So, you do want to, validate so you don't make that mistake. It happens a lot, right? And it is avoidable. So I said, the best thing is it's a technology statement. Let's make it a technology statement, because we had miniaturized a lot of piece parts inside, but we were already down the road. They had already made the decision. So we had to keep marching, and it was not a pretty product. It was not a successful product launch or execution in the long term. It ended up costing a company a whole lot of money. And guess what? The customers told us.
And they always will. So with that, I will wrap up this segment, and we'll take an 8-minute break. I think Sean can get it set up for the next segment in 8. We will reconvene at 6:35 with just the Tech Runway group and have a little bit longer conversation. But thank you all for joining us for this first session, and I'll see most of you shortly, and I'll see you again, Rachelle, as well.
Okay, cool. Guys, I hope it was helpful for you. Stay well and stay safe.